I thought I was helping my daughter for a few days, but the moment I picked up that phone call, something inside me quietly whispered that this favor would change my life forever. My name is Eleanor Whitman. I am 63 years old, and I have lived in San Jose for most of my life. After my husband passed away 7 years ago, my world slowly grew smaller. My days became predictable. Morning coffee by the window, a short walk around the neighborhood, evenings spent watching old shows I barely paid attention to. The only thing that still made my heart race a little was when my phone rang and my daughter's name appeared on the screen. My daughter's name is Claire. Claire has always been independent. Even as a child, she preferred figuring things out on her own rather than asking for help. As she grew older, that independence turned into distance, polite phone calls, short visits, conversations that felt carefully measured. I told myself that was normal. People get busy. Lives move on. Mothers should not cling. So when Claire called me early on a Tuesday morning, my first feeling was relief. "Mom, I need your help," she said, her voice tight, rushed. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. She explained that she and her husband had to leave town unexpectedly, something about work obligations that could not be delayed. They needed someone to stay at their house and help look after her mother-in-law, a woman named Ruth, who had been in a coma for months after a serious accident. "She can't be left alone," Claire said. "The nurse only comes twice a day. We just need someone in the house, just in case." Her words were calm, but something about the way she avoided details made my stomach tighten. I asked how long they would be gone. 3 days, maybe 4, she replied quickly. "Everything is already set up. You won't have to do much." I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why professional care was not enough. I should have listened to that quiet voice in my head that said something did not add up. But instead, I heard what I wanted to hear. My daughter needed me. "I'll come," I said, before doubt could catch up with my voice. There was a pause on the line. Then relief. "Thank you, Mom. I knew I could count on you." After we hung up, I stood alone in my kitchen, holding my phone, staring at nothing. The house felt unusually silent. I told myself I was imagining things, that this was just nerves, that helping family was the right thing to do. I packed a small overnight bag that afternoon. As I folded my clothes, I felt a strange mix of purpose and unease. I had no idea that by stepping into my daughter's house, I was also stepping into a carefully built lie. And once that door closed behind her, there would be no turning back. Claire's house sat at the end of a quiet street on the outskirts of San Jose, surrounded by identical homes with trimmed lawns and closed curtains. From the outside, everything looked ordinary, safe, the kind of place where nothing truly bad should ever happen. Claire opened the door before I could knock. She smiled and hugged me, but the embrace felt brief, almost distracted. Her eyes kept drifting toward the hallway behind her, as if she were already mentally leaving. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Mom," she said. "I know this is a lot to ask." Her husband, Mark, appeared a moment later, already dressed as if he were running late. He nodded politely, checked his watch, and gave me a tight smile that never quite reached his eyes. They led me down the hall toward the guest room, which had been transformed into something between a hospital ward and a bedroom. A narrow medical bed sat against the wall. Machines hummed softly, lights blinking in steady rhythms. Tubes and wires ran neatly along the floor and up into the equipment. And in the middle of it all lay Ruth. She was smaller than I expected, frail. Her gray hair had been brushed carefully, her face pale but peaceful. If not for the machines, she could have been mistaken for someone simply asleep after a long, exhausting day. "She hasn't woken up since the accident," Claire said quietly. "The doctors say she's in a persistent vegetative state." The words sounded practiced, like she had said them many times before. She adjusted the blanket over Ruth's chest with careful precision, her movements gentle but oddly detached. "The nurse comes in the morning and again in the evening," Mark added. "Medications are labeled. Emergency numbers are on the fridge." They spoke quickly, efficiently, as if reading from a checklist. I nodded along, trying to absorb everything, but my attention kept drifting back to Ruth's face. There was something about her expression that made me uneasy. Not fear, not pain. Something else. Something I could not name. Claire handed me a printed schedule. "Just follow this. There's really nothing for you to do, except be here." Their luggage stood by the front door, already packed. The urgency in the air made my chest feel tight. "You'll call, right?" I asked, suddenly aware of how alone I would be once they left. "Of course," Claire said, though she did not meet my eyes. "We'll check in." Mark kissed Claire's cheek, then turned to me. "We appreciate this more than you know." And just like that, they were gone. I stood in the entryway, listening as the front door closed, the sound echoing through the house. Their car pulled away, the engine fading into the distance until there was nothing left but silence. The house felt different without them, heavier. The hum of the medical machine seemed louder now, filling the space with an unsettling rhythm. I walked back to Ruth's room and sat beside the bed. Up close, I could see the faint rise and fall of her chest. Her breathing was steady, calm. "She's peaceful," I whispered to myself. But as I reached out to adjust the blanket, a chill ran down my spine. For the first time since arriving, I felt a deep, unshakable sense that I was not just watching over someone. I was being placed exactly where someone else wanted me to be. I stayed beside Ruth's bed longer than I meant to. The steady beeping of the machines created a strange sense of time slipping away, as if the world outside that room had paused. I told myself this discomfort was normal. Anyone would feel uneasy sitting alone with a woman who had not opened her eyes in months. I stood to make myself a cup of tea, hoping the simple routine would calm my nerves. But before I reached the doorway, I heard it. A sound. Soft, broken, almost like a breath trying to form words. I froze. At first, I convinced myself it was one of the machines. Old houses made noises. Tubes shifted, metal clicked. I took one more step toward the hall, and then I heard it again. "Please, don't leave." The voice was weak, but unmistakably human. My heart slammed against my chest as I turned slowly back toward the bed. Ruth's eyes were open. Not fluttering, not unfocused. Open and locked onto mine. I stumbled backward, grabbing the edge of the bed to keep myself from falling. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You're awake," I whispered. Her lips trembled as she nodded. The movement so small, it might have gone unnoticed by anyone not staring directly at her. "Thank God," she murmured. "You're finally alone." My legs gave out, and I sank into the chair beside her bed. Claire said, "The doctors said you were in a coma." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. She swallowed hard before speaking again. That's what they want everyone to believe. The room seemed to tilt. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to slow my breathing. "How long?" I managed. "How long have you been awake?" "Long enough," she said. "Long enough to know I might not survive this if someone didn't come." I leaned closer, my voice shaking. "What are you talking about?" "They drug me," she whispered. "Every day, sometimes twice a day, just enough to keep me unconscious when anyone else is around." I shook my head, refusing to accept it. "That's not possible. Claire wouldn't do that. She's my daughter." Ruth squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "I know this is hard to hear, but she and her husband are stealing from me. My money, my house, everything I worked for. A cold wave swept through my body. No, there must be some mistake. There isn't, Ruth said quietly. And that's not the worst part. I swallowed. What could be worse than this? She looked toward the door, then back at me. Her voice dropped to a whisper so soft I had to lean in to hear it. They're planning to let me die. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. And, she added after a moment, they brought you here so you could say you never saw me wake up. My stomach twisted violently. In that instant, I understood something terrifying. I had not been invited into this house to help. I had been chosen to make sure no one ever questioned what was about to happen. I sat frozen beside Ruth's bed, my fingers still wrapped around her hand as if letting go might make everything she said disappear. My mind raced, trying to find a version of reality where this made sense, where my daughter was still the person I believed she was. You must be confused, I whispered, though my voice lacked conviction. You've been through a terrible accident. Medications can cause hallucinations. Ruth shook her head slowly. I thought the same thing at first. I wanted to believe I was imagining it. But confusion doesn't explain forged signatures. It doesn't explain empty accounts. My chest tightened. What do you mean, empty accounts? She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. They've been moving money for months, small amounts at first, so no one would notice. Retirement funds, investment accounts, even my savings from the house I own in Oregon. I felt dizzy. Claire said, she was handling your finances to help you recover. That's what she told everyone, Ruth said bitterly. What she didn't say is that I never agreed to give her power over anything. She shifted slightly, wincing as pain shot through her body. I adjusted her pillows without thinking, my hands trembling. They told doctors I was confused, she continued, agitated, violent at times. They said it was safer to keep me heavily sedated. They said it was kinder. I remembered Claire's calm voice, the way she spoke about Ruth's condition like she was reciting a script. The memory made my skin crawl. And the medications? I asked. The nurse? She seemed legitimate. She is, Ruth said. That's part of why this works. Your daughter times everything carefully. She gives me the strongest doses before each visit. By the time the nurse arrives, I'm barely breathing, completely unresponsive. My stomach turned. Why would they do this to you? Ruth opened her eyes and looked at me with a sadness that went deeper than fear. Because they're greedy, and because they believe I won't live long enough to stop them. The room felt unbearably small. They can't just let you die. They can, she said softly. And they plan to make it look natural. A tragic complication. A body that finally gives up after months of suffering. I thought of the schedule Claire had handed me, the neat labels, the calm instructions. I felt sick realizing how carefully everything had been planned. And me, I said slowly. Why bring me here? Ruth's gaze hardened. Because they need someone trustworthy, someone who would never suspect them, someone who could honestly say, I was there. She never woke up. The truth slammed into me so hard it stole my breath. They're using me, I whispered. Yes, Ruth said. But worse than that, they're putting you in danger. I looked at her sharply. What do you mean? If something happens to me and you start asking questions, she said, you become a problem, and problems have a way of disappearing. My heart began to pound. I thought of my quiet house, my predictable routines, how easily I could vanish without anyone truly noticing. Eleanor, Ruth said gently, I don't have much time, but you do. You can still walk away. I stood abruptly and paced the room, my thoughts spinning. Walk away. Leave her here alone with people who wanted her dead. Pretend I never heard the truth. I stopped and looked at her again. Frail, drugged, trapped. No, I said firmly. I'm not leaving. Ruth studied my face, searching for doubt. When she didn't find it, something shifted in her expression. Not relief, determination. Then you need to understand everything, she said, because what they're planning is worse than you think. And as she began to explain how deep the deception went, I realized, with terrifying clarity, that my daughter was no longer just capable of cruelty. She was capable of murder. Ruth waited until the house was completely still before speaking again. Even then, she kept her voice low, as if the walls themselves might be listening. They think I'm helpless, she said. That's their biggest mistake. I leaned closer. What do you mean? For months, Ruth explained, I've been pretending to be exactly what they want me to be. Unconscious, unaware, easy to control. Her lips tightened. But when you're believed to be invisible, people stop guarding their words. They stop hiding their actions. A chill ran through me. They talk, she continued, about money, about timelines, about how long they think my body can last under increased doses. I felt my hands clench into fists. And no one has suspected anything? They've been careful, Ruth said. Very careful. They created a story so detailed that it sounds more believable than the truth. Doctors see charts. Nurses see symptoms. Everyone sees what they expect to see. She glanced toward the door. But there are cracks. That was when she told me about the hidden things in the house. The drawer in the office where forged documents were kept. The locked cabinet in the laundry room where medications that were never prescribed were stored. The notebook. What notebook? I asked. Ruth swallowed. Claire writes everything down. Dosages, reactions, timing. She treats this like a project, like something to be managed efficiently. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to stay focused. If we find it, what then? Then we stop them, she said. But we have to be smart. If they suspect anything before we're ready, neither of us will be safe. Over the next 2 days, we moved carefully. When the nurse came, Ruth became still again, her body slack, her breathing shallow. I played my role, asking gentle questions, expressing concern, never pushing too hard. Once the house was quiet again, we searched. In the office, behind neatly stacked tax folders, I found documents bearing Ruth's signature, or what was supposed to be her signature. The handwriting was close, but not quite right. Practiced. Repeated. In the laundry room, hidden behind cleaning supplies, I found bottles with unfamiliar labels. Some had no labels at all. And then there was the notebook. My hands trembled as I opened it. Page after page of neat handwriting filled with dates, measurements, and notes about Ruth's responsiveness. Increased dose resulted in deeper sedation. Breakthrough awareness observed. Must adjust. Target window for final decline after next trip. I felt physically ill. She planned this, I whispered. Yes, Ruth said quietly, and she thinks she's already won. That night, as I lay awake in the guest room, every sound made my heart race. I replayed every interaction I had ever had with my daughter, searching for signs I might have missed. How had I not seen this coming? The next morning, Ruth told me something that shifted everything. I contacted a lawyer months ago, she said, through a friend, and eventually, authorities. But they need proof of intent, not just theft, not just neglect. My breath caught. They need evidence that they plan to kill you. She nodded. And that's where you come in. I stared at her, fear and resolve colliding in my chest. "They trust you," Ruth said. "They think you're harmless. That makes you the most dangerous person in this house." In that moment, I understood something terrifying and powerful. I was no longer just a witness. I was part of the trap. They came back sooner than expected. I was in the kitchen rinsing a cup when I heard the sound of tires on gravel, followed by the low murmur of voices outside. My heart dropped. We were not ready. Not fully, but there was no time to panic. I walked to Ruth's room just as the front door opened. She had already gone still, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow and uneven. To anyone watching, she looked exactly as they believed she should. "Mom, we're home," Claire called out, her voice bright, almost cheerful. She appeared in the doorway moments later, suitcase still in hand. Her eyes went straight to Ruth, then to me. She smiled. "How was everything?" she asked. "Quiet," I said. The nurse came as scheduled. She mentioned Ruth's breathing seemed a little slower. For just a second, something flickered across Claire's face. Satisfaction. It was gone so quickly, I might have imagined it if I hadn't been watching so closely. "That can happen," she said calmly, "especially at this stage." Mark set their bags down and leaned against the wall. "Doctors warned us things might start declining soon." The words landed exactly as Ruth had predicted. That evening, the house felt different. Tighter. Claire hovered over Ruth's bed longer than before, adjusting IV lines, checking charts, making notes. She spoke softly, but there was no tenderness in her movements now. Only control. At dinner, Claire spoke openly, assuming I was still the obedient, trusting mother she believed me to be. "We need to be prepared," she said, folding her napkin carefully. "If Ruth's condition worsens, it could happen quickly." "What should I watch for?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Changes in breathing, skin color, long pauses between breaths," she replied without hesitation. "If that happens, we'll do everything we can. But sometimes the body just gives up." Mark nodded. "At least she won't suffer." I felt something inside me harden. Later that night, Claire cornered me in the hallway. "Mom," she said softly, placing a hand on my arm, "I need to know I can count on you." My pulse quickened. "Count on me for what?" She lowered her voice. "If things take a turn. If Ruth passes while you're here, we'll need you to be very clear about what you saw." "I saw someone who never woke up," I said carefully. Claire smiled. "Exactly." Her grip tightened just slightly. "You're older. You live alone. I worry about you sometimes." The threat was subtle, wrapped in concern, but unmistakable. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, Claire began documenting what she called concerning changes. She made phone calls to doctors I had never met. She spoke in urgent tones, describing symptoms she herself was creating. The nurse arrived in the afternoon and confirmed the decline Claire had predicted: lower oxygen levels, irregular heart rate. "This could be the beginning of the end," the nurse said gently. Claire nodded solemnly. "We'll keep her comfortable." After the nurse left, Claire prepared the evening medications herself. I watched from the doorway as she measured carefully, more precisely than before. "This may be the last adjustment," she said quietly. "It's the humane thing to do." I met Ruth's eyes for the briefest moment. She squeezed my fingers once. We were close now, closer than Claire realized. And as she lifted the syringe, believing she was about to finish what she started, she had no idea that everything she said and did was being recorded. The monster was finally fully exposed, and the trap was ready to close. Claire stepped closer to the bed, the syringe steady in her hand. Her face was calm, focused, almost serene. as if she were performing a routine task instead of ending a life. "This will help her rest," she said softly, more to herself than to me. Mark stood by the door, arms crossed, watching. There was no hesitation in his eyes, no doubt, only impatience. I felt my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Every instinct in my body screamed to stop her, to grab her arm, to shout. But Ruth's fingers pressed gently against mine. A signal. Now. "Wait," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Claire paused, annoyed. "What is it, Mom?" "I want to say goodbye," I said. In case this is the last time." She hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, take your time." I leaned over Ruth, brushing her hair back as if in comfort. To anyone watching, it looked like a final, tender moment. I whispered one word. "Now." Ruth's eyes opened. Not slowly, not groggily. Wide, alert, alive. Claire screamed and dropped the syringe. It hit the floor and rolled under the bed, the liquid inside spilling across the tile. Mark stumbled backward, knocking into the wall. "This isn't possible," Claire whispered. "You can't. You're not supposed to." Ruth sat up. The machines continued their steady hum, as if nothing extraordinary were happening. But everything had changed. "Hello, Claire," Ruth said calmly. "Were you about to give me my final dose?" Claire's face drained of color. "She's confused," she stammered. "This is one of her episodes." "Is it?" Ruth reached for the small recorder on the bedside table. Then, "Let's listen together." She pressed a button. The room filled with Claire's voice from the night before. "If she doesn't make it through the week, everything transfers automatically." Mark's voice followed. "Your mom will say she never woke up. No one will question it." Claire collapsed into the chair beside the bed. "You recorded us," she whispered. "For weeks," Ruth replied. "Every plan, every lie, every threat." Mark turned toward me, panic in his eyes. "Mom, you knew about this?" I stood up slowly. "I know exactly who you are now." Ruth looked at them both. "The authorities have already heard everything. They're outside." As if summoned by her words, there was a loud knock at the front door, then another. "Police, open the door." Claire burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. Mark froze, his mouth opening and closing as if he could still talk his way out of it. Officers poured into the room moments later. Weapons drawn, voices firm and controlled. Claire and Mark were handcuffed, their protests echoing through the house they thought they owned. As they were led away, Claire twisted around to look at me. "You betrayed your own daughter," she cried. I met her eyes, my voice steady for the first time in days. "No, I stopped a stranger." When the door finally closed behind the officers, the house fell silent again. But this time, the silence felt like relief. Ruth let out a long breath and leaned back against her pillows. "It's over," she said. And for the first time since that terrible phone call, I believed it. The house felt different after they were gone. Not empty, but lighter, as if the walls themselves had been holding their breath for months and could finally exhale. Ruth stayed in the hospital for several weeks after that night. The drugs slowly left her system, and with proper care, her strength began to return. Doctors were shocked by her recovery. They called it remarkable. Ruth called it survival. Claire and Mark were charged with elder abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, documents, timelines. There was no story they could invent to save themselves. During the trial, Claire never once looked at me. When she did speak, she insisted she had only done what was necessary, that she deserved what she took. I did not recognize her voice. When the sentence was handed down, I felt no victory, only closure, the kind that comes when the truth is finally spoken out loud. In the months that followed, Ruth and I grew close in a way neither of us had expected. We spoke often about guilt, about blindness, about the quiet ways evil hides behind familiar faces. She sold her house and moved closer to people she trusted. I downsized my life too. I learned that starting over did not mean failing. It meant choosing myself. Sometimes I still think about the woman I raised, about where I went wrong, but I no longer let that question define me. Some choices belong only to the people who make them. What I know now is this: love should never demand your silence. Family should never require your fear. And truth, even when it costs you everything, is the only thing that truly sets you free. At 63, I discovered that courage does not fade with age. It waits, quietly, until the moment you need it most. And if my story reaches even one person who feels trapped by loyalty, fear, or blood ties, then telling it was worth it. 5 life lessons from this story. 1. Trust your instincts even when it hurts. 2. Blood does not excuse betrayal. 3. Silence protects the wrong people. 4. Courage can come later, but it must come. 5. It is never too late to choose the truth. What lesson did you take from this story? And which city are you watching from? Like, share, and comment. Your voice matters more than you think.